June 28, 1914, the Archduke of Austria-Hungary, Francis Ferdinand, was assassinated. Austria-Hungary declared war on Serbia and thus commenced World War I. The death of one man led to a system of alliances pulling all of the major powers into a conflict that would engulf Europe for 4 bloody years. Russia defended Serbia, so they declared war on Austria-Hungary. As Russia mobilized, Germany began moving into Russia and France and asking permission to pass through Belgium. England denied access and declared war on Germany.
After 6 months of grueling trench warfare at the beginning of World War I, the Christmas Truce broke the impenetrable barrier of no man's land and broke down the mental barriers between enemies, garnering a brief spirit of humanity. The Christmas Truce was a golden moment in a hopeless time and influenced history by inspiring future truces during times of war.
Within a week, several countries would become wrapped up in the war because of alliances. Those countries were Austria-Hungary, the Ottoman Empire, Germany, Britain, Serbia, Russia, and France.
Trench warfare was a significant aspect of World War I. The trenches, if laid out end to end, would stretch over 35,000 miles. There were 3 different types of trenches: firing trenches, communication trenches, and SAPs, or observation posts. Also, there were 3 lines of trenches: the first line, support line, and reserves. Trench warfare was very exhausting and drawn out for long periods of time. In the SAPs, troops would launch grenades into enemy territory and snipe them because they were more shallow.
Many diseases were developed within the trenches, such as cooties, more commonly known as lice, and trench foot. The men from both sides were extremely physically close and could hear each other talk. Occasionally, the soldiers could even hear each other cough. Though they were quite close, the troops rarely saw each other, and if they did, they were most likely killed. The trenches were tremendously muddy. The soldiers were against the elements and they could be killed in the blink of an eye. In a letter back home, a soldier commented that,
"While in the trenches last week, we were up to my knees in water and got our gumboots half full."
Unsurprisingly, the soldiers felt closer to the opposing side than their generals because they had to fight the same situations. Their generals, however, could stay back in relative peace and comfort.
Between the trenches, there was an impassable barrier called no man's land. Soldiers could not go there, and if they did, they would most certainly be shot and killed. Life in the trenches was abominable and consisted of extreme boredom with spikes of terror when attacks were launched. All of the soldiers in these trenches wanted a break from fighting.
The war was progressing on longer than anticipated. The soldiers, bloodied, injured, and tired, were exasperated by the gruesome stalemate that stood before them.
Soldiers on both sides of the war assumed that by Christmas time the war would have ended. They all believed that Germany was going to be victorious. They fought hard and long, but by December, most optimistic thoughts had vanished. A few weeks before Christmas, on December 7th, 1914, the Pope even wished for a truce. He wished
that the guns may fall silent at least upon the night the angels sang.
Germany even agreed to this idea.
Although there were a series of individual truces that happened and were instigated by different events, almost all of them were started by the Germans. In one of the trenches on Christmas Eve, one German soldier shouted to the other side,
"Tomorrow you no shoot, we no shoot."
The following day, Christmas Day, an Irish rifleman went out to speak with the Germans, crossing the unbreakable boundary of no man's land. This officially kicked off the Christmas truce of World War I.
However, not all of the truces were started by Germans. One soldier remembered the silence, the eerie sound of silence that occurred during Christmas Eve. In one trench, a Turkish soldier named Nadim instigated the truce. He started by teasing the Germans with a bullseye on a banner and taunted them by saying they could not hit it. The Germans then shot the bullseye. The Turk kept the banner up and slowly made his way into the trenches. From there, he met with the German troops. A British scout named F. Merker met a German soldier and was given whiskey and cigars with a message to bring back to his troops. The news was, if the British didn't fire at the Germans, they wouldn't fire at us.
This truce was not just confined to one part of the Western Front. On Christmas, there were ceasefires all along France, Germany, Belgium, and England. There were also truces along the Eastern Front as well. There were French, Scottish, British, and German troops. On Christmas Day, Captain A.D. Charter, a British soldier, saw a German waving his arms. The Germans held up lanterns and promised that they would not shoot if the British came up into no man's land. All across Europe, troops on both sides of the war met in no man's land, breaking the impassable barrier. There, the men did many activities with each other. The British borrowed entrenching tools like portable spades.
There was also reportedly a soccer match between the English and the Germans. There were several other attempts at soccer games, but some of them were unsuccessful. The soccer ball was later said to be a symbol of peace, destroying the mental block that the war put on the troops. In some areas, German soldiers sang Silent Night, and the British sang the First Noel. Cigarettes, cigars, gifts, and photographs were exchanged between men. Sweets that were received in care packages were also traded between troops. Joint memorial services were held to bury the dead between the two lines, demonstrating the ability of soldiers to move past stereotypes bound to the enemies put on by war. Most of these bodies were from a failed raid on December 18th.
Even though many men did participate in this truce, some soldiers refused to partake. There was one soldier that hated the Germans, and he told his fellow troops that he would kill any German that came into the trenches during the truce. Only about 2/3, or 100,000, of the soldiers engaged in the Christmas truce. A British soldier didn't want to go and spend Christmas with the Germans, and he was most afraid of going into their trenches. Even though the fierce battle had stopped on the front line and no man's land, the fighting did not stop everywhere. Most fighting in the air did not cease. Also, far from the front lines, there were Russian prisoners of war being killed.
But then, German snipers shot and killed 2 British troops while the truce was still going on. One of them, Private Percy Huggins, was on sentry duty at a forward listening post only 20 yards away from the enemy when he was shot in the head and killed. This took place half a mile short of the Rue de Bois near the French village of Festubert. This is one of the events that concluded the truce. The following day, December 26th, a Turkish soldier stood along the trenches and yelled over to the Germans in German, only to be shot in the head. The Christmas truce had officially ended and the barrier was only broken for one day.
The truce is attributed to the last of the romanticized, gentlemanly soldiers of the era. The shift away from gentlemanly soldiers came into the public's eye when they realized the truce was a one-time occurrence, and the common people thought the soldiers had become more reluctant to peace. The Christmas truce led to more small-scale truces within World War I and other minor wars.
There was not an immediate wide-scale impact, and nothing changed right away. However, it inspired troops and showed that peace is possible during times of war, showing the breaking of barriers. Another truce was going to emerge on New Year's Day, but never happened. Military leaders on both sides saw this as too soft and prevented the truce from happening. A British soldier accidentally fired into the air, ending all hopes of an unofficial ceasefire in any case.
A young German soldier reprimanded other men in the trench while the Christmas truce was happening, saying,
"Such a thing should not happen in wartime. Have you no German sense of honor left?"
These words were by a 25-year-old soldier named Adolf Hitler, who would later lead Germany in World War II. This showed early indications of a sense of nationalism.
Some people believe that the World War I Christmas truce was a myth and never happened. This has sparked many debates between historians and people trying to find out what actually happened during this time. The World War I Christmas truce led to many smaller truces in the war and also paved the way for other truces and wars in the future. The truce is viewed as an extraordinary moment in a gruesome, dark time of war. 100 years later, there have been reenactments of the supposed soccer game. The soccer game consisted of the German and English armies meeting in no man's land and playing a match. The truce is remembered as a testament to the power of hope and humanity in a truly dark hour of history.
Alfred Anderson, the last man alive from the Christmas truce, died in 2005 at age 109, but could still remember what happened the first night, showing the impact that it had on the rest of the soldier's life. He told the New York Times,
"We shouted Merry Christmas even though nobody felt merry. The silence ended early in the afternoon and the killing started again. It was a short peace in a terrible war."
The Christmas truce of 1914 broke barriers in multiple ways, such as breaking down the mental barrier of stereotypes put on the enemies by the soldiers.
At the same time, it also breached the impassable obstacle of no man's land and further leading to smaller truces in the future.
Ultimately, the truce demonstrates that there can be light in dark areas, and we humans are responsible for creating the light.